The announcement echoed through the terminal, but it was the soft voice of a flight attendant inside the first-class cabin that shattered the silence. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we need you to give up seat 1A for a VIP passenger." In that instant, time seemed to freeze. Curious eyes turned toward a middle-aged man. Jordan Mercer, 46, wore a simple navy blazer over a grey T-shirt, dark jeans and polished leather shoes. No extra buttons, no flashy accessories. He sat upright, calm, as if long accustomed to chaos swirling around him. No one here knew that this man was the CEO of Meridian Nexus Systems, a multi-billion-dollar technology empire that powered the entire American aviation network. All they saw was an ordinary passenger, a man who didn't look like much. And that was where it began. Jordan had just signed a historic contract in Phoenix. This flight back to San Diego was meant to be his rare moment of ease after days of unrelenting pressure. But in a matter of seconds, seat 1A, the place he had chosen for peace, became a battlefield. From the far end of the cabin, a younger figure strode forward. Blake Voss, 31, golden hair slicked back with confidence, sunglasses perched carelessly atop his head, a pale blue shirt rolled to the elbows. Every step radiated arrogance, as if the entire aircraft existed solely to serve him. Blake didn't need to speak. His half-smile and folded arms carried the message clearly. Seat 1A was his by right. The young flight attendant, Ava Lynn, her slender shoulders tense under the pressure, bent slightly toward Jordan. Her voice was soft, but the strain was evident. "I'm sorry. There's been a seating mix-up. Seat 1A is reserved for a special passenger. If you would move to 3C, we'll make sure you're well taken care of." Jordan raised his head, his voice low, each word falling with the weight of steel. "My ticket says 1A. I booked it weeks ago. Why should I move?" Ava faltered, her eyes flickering unconsciously toward Blake, who stood tall like a king waiting for his throne. The air in the cabin thickened, stretched like an over-tightened string. Other passengers buried themselves in magazines or stooped to tie shoelaces, but furtive glances betrayed their curiosity. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. Then, from across the aisle, a woman's voice cut through. Eleanor Briggs, 66, her silver hair neat and her eyes sharp with experience, could take no more. "Why should he leave? His ticket says the seat is his. This is ridiculous." Her words rang like a bell that shattered the hush. Jordan hesitated, just for a moment. Memories surged back. Networking events where he was dismissed as an intern. Meetings where they mistook him for an assistant until his signature sealed the deal. 20 years of career, and he had grown used to being underestimated. But there are moments one cannot let pass. Moments that define not an hour, but a life. Jordan lifted his chin, his eyes locking on Ava. "I will not leave this seat." A nervous smile flickered across Ava's lips before she turned away, leaving behind a silence that felt ready to snap. Blake's smirk vanished, his brows drawn tight, lips pressed together. Eleanor leaned slightly toward Jordan, her gaze shimmering with quiet solidarity. Other passengers bent further into their distractions, but the shift in the air was unmistakable. First class was no longer calm. Everyone knew this was only the prologue to a longer confrontation. None of them realized that the man sitting silently in 1A, the one they mistook for a nobody, held the fate of the airline itself in his hands. Because Meridian Nexus Systems, the empire Jordan had built, was the beating heart of Horizon Jet Airways. From flight schedules and maintenance to crew management, every system ran on his company's infrastructure. One small decision in this moment, one seat that seemed trivial, could become the costliest mistake in Horizon Jet's history. Jordan leaned back, eyes drifting to the window, where the Dallas sunset bathed the runway in crimson. Outside, the sun was sinking. In Schuhul, a quiet fire had been lit, a fire that would consume the arrogance Blake and the airline itself mistook for power. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to boast. He only needed to hold on to seat 1A. And with that silence, Jordan Mercer had just struck the spark of a storm that would shake an entire aviation empire. Heavy footsteps thudded against the plush carpet of the first-class cabin. Jordan had just closed his eyes to steal a moment of calm when a hard, commanding voice pierced the air beside him. "Mr. Mercer, there has been a serious mistake. We need you to change seats immediately." The man speaking was Cole Ramirez, 42, the purser. His square jaw and furrowed brow carried the harsh authority of someone used to issuing orders rather than serving. Behind him, Ava Lynn bowed her head, her face a mix of tension and guilt. Jordan opened his eyes. His gaze was cold, restrained, but steady. "A mistake for you, or for me?" Cole lowered his voice, though the steel within it was still clear. "Seat 1A has been reserved for a very important passenger. Blake Voss is a Platinum VIP. This is critical for today's flight." From the cabin entrance, Blake stepped forward, tapping his fingers lightly against a seat back, a half-smile curving on his lips like a challenge. "I fly this route every week. This seat has always been mine." "Nothing personal, Mr. Mercer." Jordan turned, his voice low but every word striking like a hammer. "Nothing personal when you force me out of the seat I paid for just because someone else wants it. That is personal." The cabin thickened with silence. All eyes turned forward. A few passengers sighed quietly. Others shifted uneasily, worried about delays. Then a deep male voice rang out. Daniel Cho, 54, folded his magazine, sat upright, and spoke clearly. "The ticket decides the seat. End of story." Eleanor Briggs shot a quick glance toward Jordan and added, her tone slicing the air like a blade, "That young man hasn't even had the courtesy to ask politely. This isn't service. It's abuse of privilege." Cole froze. He hadn't expected such strong support for Jordan, but instead of yielding, he leaned closer, his voice dropping low, yet loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "If you refuse, this flight will be delayed. Every passenger here will suffer because of your decision." Jordan leaned back, a faint smile flickering at the corner of his mouth. "Then let it be delayed. I will not give up this seat." The words dropped into the cabin like the crack of a judge's gavel. Some passengers muttered in frustration, anxious about being late, but in many eyes there was a spark of agreement. Blake tightened his grip on his leather bag, the smug grin fading into a scowl. The thought that an ordinary-looking, middle-aged man dared defy his supposed entitlement sent blood rushing to his face. Cole turned sharply, leaving behind words that chilled the air. "We'll handle this immediately." Jordan knew handle meant they would bring in someone higher up, adding more pressure, more threats. He drew a slow breath, his hand gripping the armrest. Memories surged back, those years of being overlooked, the cold handshakes, the conferences where eyes slid past him as though he were just a minor employee. But this time was different. This was no longer about a seat. This was about dignity. At the back of the cabin, Eleanor watched quietly. She saw it in the way Jordan sat tall, in the steady calm of his eyes. There was something unusual about him, a quiet authority that belied his simple appearance. Minutes later, as promised, Cole returned. This time, he brought Patrick Sloane, 50 ground operations supervisor. His tailored suit gleamed, his name badge polished bright. Patrick's strained smile did little to soften the weight in his voice, which carried clearly through the cabin. "Mr. Mercer, to ensure this flight departs on time, we are requesting that you move. If you refuse, we will be forced to take stronger measures." First class buzzed with murmurs. Some gasped. Others casually raised their phones, their lenses capturing what was now no longer a private dispute, but a public spectacle. Jordan set his folder neatly on the table, eyes locking on Patrick. His voice was cold as a blade. "You are asking me to surrender the seat I legally purchased, to hand it over to someone who only claims to be VIP. This is not a mistake. This is a public humiliation." The cabin went deathly still. Eleanor struck her hand lightly against her armrest. "The real disruption is right here, not Mr. Mercer." Daniel nodded, his tone firm as steel. "The ticket decides the seat. Let this flight depart." Patrick's jaw clenched, his fake smile dissolving. He hissed through his teeth. "Fine. Stay there. But don't forget, this will be recorded." He turned and left, leaving the air heavier than ever. Jordan leaned his head back against the seat, eyes half closed. He didn't need victory in this moment. He only needed not to lose. And in his mind, a sharp thought echoed. The seat 1A they tried to steal would become the costliest mistake in Horizon Jet's history. Outside, the Dallas sunset washed the runway in red. Inside, the quiet fire within Jordan Mercer had just been fed with more fuel. The crackling voice of the intercom echoed through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are finalizing seating arrangements. Thank you for your patience." The phrase "seating arrangements" rang like an alarm bell. Everyone knew. The issue of Seat 1A was far from over. Jordan opened his eyes, muscles tensed beneath his navy blazer, like steel cables ready to snap, but his face remained calm. It was not concession, but a storm contained. Minutes later, as expected, Patrick Sloane returned. This time there was no strained smile. At his side was Cole Ramirez, his heavy steps deliberate, meant to project intimidation. Together they stood in the aisle, blocking the way, eyes sharp and oppressive. Patrick's voice was loud and clear, crafted to carry across the cabin. "Mr. Mercer, this is your final warning. We require you to vacate seat 1A for a priority passenger. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to remove you from the aircraft." Murmurs rose instantly. Phones lifted quietly, lenses trained toward the front. What had begun as a dispute had become public theater, and the audience was the entire first-class cabin. Near the entrance, Blake Voss leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a smug smile plastered across his face as if victory was already his. Jordan placed his folder on the small table, raising his head slowly. His voice was even, not loud, but each word resonated like iron. "Let me be clear. I purchased a first-class ticket, seat 1A, weeks in advance. I boarded this plane on time, following every procedure. And now you want to force me from my seat to appease someone else, turning this into a public humiliation. So tell me, who is the real disruptor here?" The cabin went still. His words struck like an indictment against Horizon Jet itself. Eleanor Briggs wrapped her hand sharply on her armrest, her voice cutting through. "This is blatant injustice. You are abusing authority." Daniel Cho leaned forward, his tone cold as ice. "He's right. Do you want this flight to depart, or do you want it to become a laughingstock on social media?" Another passenger whispered, "I'm recording everything. It's all documented." He lowered his newspaper slightly, revealing a phone that had been filming all along. Patrick faltered. His eyes swept the cabin, catching the dozens of small, unblinking lenses that now held the power. Control no longer rested with the crew, but with these witnesses. Jordan leaned forward, his voice low but heavy as lead. "You can drag me out. But if you do, remember this. You will be pulling a paying passenger from the seat he rightfully bought just to indulge another man. That image will travel everywhere. Are you ready for that?" Patrick's lips tightened, his composure slipping. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Sensing it, Blake could no longer contain himself. He strode forward, his voice dripping with venom. "Enough! I am VIP. Horizon Jet knows the value I bring. This seat is mine. He should know his place." The cabin froze. The arrogance was naked now, unmasked. There was no more talk of technical errors or administrative mistakes. This was privilege laid bare. Jordan turned his head, locking eyes with Blake. No rage, no shouting, just a look, sharp as a blade. "Perhaps it's you who doesn't know your place." For a fleeting second, Blake faltered. His smug grin wavered, a flicker of instinct warning him that the man before him was far from ordinary. Patrick exhaled, his voice strained and weary. "Fine. You may keep your seat. We'll find another solution." He turned, walking away with Cole, leaving the air thick behind them. Jordan leaned back, his eyes drifting to the window. The engines roared, preparing for takeoff. But inside, a decision had already been made. This battle was not over. It had only just begun. The plane's wheels hit the runway in San Diego just as the last light of dusk faded. Golden beams stretched across the cabin windows, casting long shadows like torn fragments of memory etched into Jordan Mercer's mind. He remained seated until most passengers had disembarked. Blake Voss slipped past quickly, avoiding eye contact like a man who had lost a game he thought was already won. Eleanor Briggs paused, offering Jordan a nod of encouragement, her eyes glowing with respect. But Jordan did not feel victorious. Instead, a cold emptiness gnawed at his chest. He had kept his seat, yes, but the humiliation of being pressured, threatened, and put on display before dozens of people had carved into him like a wound that would not heal. Outside, a sleek black sedan waited. Michael Torres, his loyal driver of many years, opened the door with a warm smile. "Smooth flight, sir?" Jordan hesitated. The truth sat heavy in his throat, but never left his lips. Instead, he gave a short reply. "We're here." On the drive home, the glow of streetlights flickered across his face, each flash carving another line into his silence. His phone buzzed endlessly. Emails poured in, reports, updates, congratulations on the Phoenix deal he had just signed, a triumph that should have filled the entire company with pride. But tonight, it all felt hollow. In the stillness of his kitchen, Jordan set a glass of cold water on the table. The clear liquid felt heavy, like evidence of his disgrace. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Blake's arrogant sneer, heard Patrick's cold threats, and caught the flicker of guilt in Ava's eyes as she looked away. Memories of his early years flooded back, being mistaken for a technician at his own presentations, standing before investors who dismissed him outright simply because he did not look like a billionaire. For years, he endured, swallowed it, and let results speak. But this time was different. They had not just underestimated him. They had desecrated his dignity in public, reducing him to a spectacle for the sake of a self-proclaimed VIP. Jordan's grip tightened on the glass until his knuckles turned white. One thought burned clear and unshakable. Someone would have to pay. He picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. On the other end, a gravelly voice answered. "Mercer, I'm still at the office, reviewing the Phoenix reports." It was Maya Patel, 44, his COO and most trusted ally, the one who had stood with him through countless hard-fought deals. Jordan lowered his voice, every word forged in steel. "Maya, I want every contract with Horizon Jet Airways on my desk tomorrow morning. Every clause, every timeline, every point where they depend on our systems. All of it." Silence hung for a beat. Maya's voice dropped to a near whisper. "What happened, Jordan?" He sank into a chair, staring into the dark void of the kitchen. The fury had passed. What remained was clarity, cold and sharp as glass. "I'll tell you tomorrow. Just be ready. Tomorrow morning, we begin." The call ended. Jordan leaned back, taking a slow, steady breath. The sting of humiliation coursing through his chest was hardening into something else. Resolve. Outside, the San Diego night was still, the city lights spilling across the wooden floor. Jordan whispered into the darkness, almost like a vow. "Seat 1A. They think it's just a seat. But to me, it will be the most expensive mistake they've ever made." Somewhere in the shadows, a storm had been awakened, and Jordan Mercer, the man they dismissed as just another passenger, had become that storm. Dawn cast its golden glow over the glass towers of San Diego. On the top floor of Meridian Nexus Systems, the conference room doors opened, flooding the space with morning light. Jordan Mercer entered, his stride steady, his face expressionless. But in his eyes, the storm was ready to break. On the table lay a thick stack of documents. Maya Patel, her eyes shadowed from a sleepless night, rose to greet him. She slid the file toward Jordan, her voice hoarse but resolute. "This is the complete set of contracts with Horizon Jet Airways. They rely on us for everything, from scheduling to maintenance to crew management. If our system stops, even for a few hours, they collapse into chaos." Jordan flipped through the pages, his gaze slicing across each clause like a blade. No detail escaped his scrutiny. He stopped, his voice level and cold. "If we withdraw priority, who's ready to take their place?" Maya's lips curved into a faint smile, a glint of calculation in her eyes. "At least 3 carriers. Aerovista and Skylynx are at the front of the line. They've been waiting for this chance." Jordan leaned back, fingers steepled before him. His voice dropped, heavy as a hammer. "Starting today, Horizon Jet goes to the bottom of the list. No more urgent services, no more special support. We give them only what the contract requires. Everything else goes to their rivals." Maya lifted her head, caught off guard for a moment. "Do you want to warn them first?" Jordan shook his head slowly, a cold smile flickering across his lips. "No. Let them find out on their own. When they do, they'll realize that seat 1A they tried to steal is the most expensive seat in their history." The room thickened with silence, broken only by the shuffle of papers and the low hum of the air vents. Maya gave a small nod, admiration mingling with unease in her eyes. "You're not just retaliating, Jordan. You're teaching them a lesson." Jordan gripped the file tighter, his gaze fixed on the city bathed in morning light through the glass wall. "No, Maya, this isn't revenge for a seat. This is the price of disrespect. If they think they can push me aside, it means they think they can push anyone aside. That culture has to be punished." That day, the order was carried out in silence. The operations team quietly adjusted schedules. Emergency requests from Horizon Jet were pushed to the back of the queue. Software updates that once had priority within hours now waited in line like any mid-tier client. Meanwhile, the customer relations team reached out to Aerovista and Skylynx. Draft contracts were exchanged, with promises attached. Meridian Nexus resources will prioritize you. No one outside the highest ranks knew the true reason. Yet the company's atmosphere grew taut, like a string drawn tight, ready to snap. By late afternoon, Jordan stood alone in his vast office. The setting sun spilled red fire over San Diego Bay, glowing like embers across the horizon. In that moment, he saw Blake Voss's arrogant grin, Patrick Sloane's threat. "We'll drag you off this plane." And he remembered Eleanor Briggs's nod of encouragement, Daniel Cho's solidarity. Together, they fused into one undeniable truth. Respect is not a commodity for negotiation. Jordan murmured, his voice heavy as a verdict. Today, they thought they won a seat. But starting tomorrow, they'll lose an empire. The ocean wind beat against the glass. In the crimson dusk, Jordan Mercer was no longer a passenger clinging to seat 1A. He was the storm quietly shifting the skies of aviation itself. On the third day after Jordan Mercer gave his order, the first signs began to appear. At Horizon Jet Airways Operations Center, The giant screens flickered with lines of red alerts. Flight delay, system sync pending. Technicians hammered at their keyboards, sweat beading on their brows. Maintenance updates that once arrived on schedule were now hours late. The crew management app froze repeatedly, throwing shift schedules into chaos like a shattered beehive. In the VIP lounge at Chicago Airport, a businessman slammed his watch against the table and shouted, "The flight is 4 hours late. What did I pay for first class for?" On social media, posts exploded as "Hat Never Fly Horizon" began to trend. A young passenger live-streamed from the terminal, exhaustion etched across his face. "We've been stuck here for almost 8 hours. They're saying it's a crew scheduling glitch. This is a joke." That chaos spread faster than the very flight's Horizon jet was losing. Meanwhile, in San Diego, the top floor of Meridian Nexus Systems was silent, like the stillness before a storm swallows everything. Jordan stood by the window, arms folded, eyes fixed on the distant ocean. Beside him, Maya Patel took a call, her voice calm, while the manager on the other end, from Horizon Jet's regional office, trembled. "Your app is too slow. We're at risk of canceling dozens of flights. Please prioritize us." Maya's reply was icy. "We process requests according to the contract. Please wait." Hanging up, she turned to Jordan. He said nothing, only nodded slightly. His expression was calm, but his eyes gleamed with unshakable resolve. At Horizon Jet's headquarters in New York, COO Samuel Boyd, 55, stood in the boardroom, sweat streaming down his face. He reported to the directors, "Flights are being delayed non-stop. Meridian Nexus no longer treats us the same. They cite procedure. Clearly, something has changed." CEO Victor Hale, 58, slammed his fist on the table, his voice booming like thunder. "We are their top strategic partner. Call them now. Sign an addendum. Pay more. Do whatever it takes." Samuel shook his head, his voice cracking. "They won't accept. All they say is, 'We will follow the contract.'" The room thickened with silence, heavy as lead. Faces went pale, eyes darted away. Everyone understood. Horizon Jet had lost its priority status. And in aviation, nothing is more dangerous than being treated as a second-class client inside the very system your survival depends on. Back in San Diego, Jordan and Maya reviewed the reports. Each delay, each cancellation appeared on the screen. Jordan did not smile in satisfaction. He simply nodded quietly, like a general watching his pieces move exactly as planned. Maya's voice dropped. "Will you meet them? They'll beg, Jordan. The question is, will you let them back?" Jordan closed his laptop, his gaze sharp as a blade cutting into the horizon. "No. I want them to piece it together themselves and understand that it all began with Seat 1A. Outside, the sunset bled red across the sky. The aviation industry was beginning to whisper that Horizon Jet was spiraling downward. Rivals Aerovista and Skylynx quietly celebrated, waiting for their moment to step in. In Horizon Jet's boardroom, the crisis spread like wildfire. One executive roared, "Find another provider!" But another shook his head in despair. "No one can replace Meridian Nexus, not within 6 months." In the corner of the room, a name surfaced, whispered like a knife cutting through the heavy air. "I heard It all started on a flight from Dallas. Seat 1A. Slowly, every eye turned to Blake Voss, who sat frozen in silence. His face was taut, sweat glistening on his temple, and for the first time in his life, Blake felt the arrogance he had always clung to begin to fracture. On Saturday morning, financial news outlets blazed with red headlines. Horizon jet in freefall, mass delays, furious passengers. Television screens across airports looped images of passengers shouting, children crying uncontrollably in crowded lounges, endless lines stretching down terminals. Amid the chaos, the voice of a middle-aged man echoed through a live stream. "I paid for first class, and this is how Horizon Jet treats its customers. They don't deserve our trust." On social media, the hashtag #JetNeverFlyHorizon shot to #1 within hours. A young woman, eyes red with exhaustion, live-streamed from the packed terminal. They once kicked a man out of his seat, a seat he paid for, just to make room for a so-called VIP. And now they can't even run their own flights. The videos spread by the millions. In an instant, Horizon Jet was no longer a luxury airline. It had become a national punchline. In San Diego, inside the sunlit office of Meridian Nexus, Jordan Mercer stood before a giant screen. The news was everywhere. Reporters, analysts, and experts all used the same word: crisis. Beside him, Maya Patel squinted at the ticker scrolling across the screen. Route cause traced to seat 1A on the Dallas-San Diego flight. Maya exhaled, a mix of shock and grim satisfaction in her voice. They've shot themselves in the foot. Jordan said nothing. Arms folded, his eyes remained locked forward, unblinking. In his mind, Patrick Sloane's threat echoed. "We'll drag you out." Then Blake Voss's sneer. "That seat has always been mine." Now those very words were haunting Horizon Jet. In Horizon Jet's New York headquarters, chaos erupted in the boardroom. Executives shouted over one another, slamming hands on the table. "We need to kill this PR nightmare immediately. Find that passenger, apologize to him publicly, compensate him 10 times over." CEO Victor Hale, his voice raw from sleepless nights, roared, "Everyone is talking about seat 1A. End it now. Find that man." Siu. Samuel Boyd, his face pale, whispered hoarsely, "You don't understand. That wasn't just a passenger. That was Jordan Mercer, CEO of Meridian Nexus Systems." The room fell silent. Faces froze, eyes widened. A few collapsed back into their chairs, muttering in disbelief. Suddenly they understood. The man they had dismissed, the man they had humiliated publicly, was the very one holding the lifeblood of their airline in his hands. Victor Hale slumped back into his chair, his grip whitening his knuckles. The truth pierced like a blade to the heart. Horizon Jet had turned its most vital partner into its enemy. In an interview, Eleanor Briggs spoke firmly, her words ringing like a bell. "I saw with my own eyes when they demanded Mr. Mercer give up his seat. It wasn't a mistake. It was blatant disrespect." Daniel Cho added sharply, "This wasn't a service error. This was a statement that power belongs to privilege." But Mr. Mercer stood his ground, and now the entire aviation industry is witnessing the price of arrogance. Their testimonies spread across every major newspaper. The image of seat 1A, left empty, became an icon. The press called it the most expensive seat in Horizon Jet's history. That evening, Jordan sat in his office. The city lights bled across the glass, shimmering like an oil spill. On television, anchors reported, Horizon Jet loses 12% of its market value in a single morning. Maya looked at him, her voice low. You've brought an empire to its knees. They'll have to beg. So what's the next move? Jordan set down his coffee, his voice steady and immovable as stone. No rescue. They need to learn that respect is never optional. It is the foundation. And those who treat it as anything less will pay the price. Outside, Horizon Jet planes still took off into the night sky, but their wings had already broken, and it had all begun with seat 1A. 2 weeks after the media storm, the skies over Horizon Jet Airways grew darker by the day. Dozens of flights were delayed daily. The stock price kept sinking, and competitors Aerovista and Skylinks announced expansion after expansion, while premium customers fled like water rushing off a sinking ship. One afternoon, inside the gleaming offices of Meridian Nexus Systems, Jordan Mercer received a thick envelope marked for special delivery. The Horizon Jet logo was embossed on the front, the handwriting on the cover shaky as if written in haste and desperation. Jordan opened it. Inside lay a formal letter, signed with the trembling hand of CEO Victor Hale. Dear Mr. Mercer, we sincerely apologize for the incident on the Dallas-San Diego flight. It was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Horizon Jet has always valued you as both a customer and a partner. We hope to rebuild trust and continue our cooperation in the future. The polished words, carefully chosen, passed before Jordan's eyes. But to him, each word was hollow and cold. An apology that arrives only after the storm has swept everything away has no meaning. He set the letter down on the dark wooden desk, the lamplight falling across the page, transforming it into evidence of a harsh truth. If he were not Jordan Mercer, the powerful CEO, but simply an ordinary passenger, who would have stood up for him? In his mind, Ivor Lynn's bowed head, Patrick Sloane's threatening voice, and Blake Voss's mocking smile came back in vivid clarity. This apology was not about justice. It was merely a last, frantic attempt to hold on to a contract slipping through their fingers. That evening, Jordan met Maya Patel at a small diner by the bay, a modest place far removed from the grand boardrooms they usually occupied. Maya gazed out at the horizon, the setting sun painting her tired face in gold after days of sleepless nights. They're desperate now, she murmured. If we agree to renegotiate, they'll pay whatever price we demand. Jordan took a sip of black coffee, the bitterness heavy in his throat. His voice was calm but resolute. No. We will honor the contract until it expires. After that, every resource shifts to their competitors. They must understand that respect cannot be bought with money. Maya nodded slowly, though her eyes revealed a flicker of concern. Aren't you afraid people will say you're being too ruthless? Jordan placed the cup back on the table, his gaze fixed on the burning horizon. No, Maya, this is not ruthlessness. This is justice. If I let this pass, tomorrow there will be thousands more passengers humiliated just because someone claims to be a VIP. A culture like that must pay the price. The next day, newspapers splashed the image of Seat 1A from the Dallas flight across their front pages. The headline in bold, "The most expensive seat in Horizon Jet's history." It was no longer just the story of a single flight. It had become a symbol that arrogance could topple an empire. At a private dinner, longtime friend Richard Monroe listened as Jordan recounted the entire ordeal. He set down his fork and knife, looking directly at Jordan. "You know, Jordan, people often think respect is just politeness. But in truth, it is the foundation. Without it, the entire tower of power collapses." Jordan was silent for a long moment before he allowed himself a faint smile. "You're right, and Horizon Jet has learned that lesson the hardest way possible." That night, Jordan sat alone in his office. The desk lamp lit up the apology letter, the paper glowing stark white like a scar. He did not tear it apart, nor did he put it away. He left it lying there as evidence of a wound that would never fade. He whispered, his voice like a final verdict. "Not money, not status. It is how you treat others when you think no one is watching that defines your true worth." His eyes glinted, not with hatred, but with a cold clarity. A clarity that from this moment forward, the balance of power in the airline industry had changed forever. August. Summer sunlight blazed across the glass towers of San Diego, but in the world of aviation, a violent storm was closing in on Horizon Jet. The day had come, the day the contract between Meridian Nexus Systems and Horizon Jet Airways officially expired. No extensions, no new agreements, no second chances. At the same time, Meridian Nexus's legal department announced 3 new contracts with Aerovista, Skylinks, and Pacific Crown. Technical resources, support staff, and network data all shifted in an instant. The news spread like wildfire across dry grass. Within hours, Horizon Jet's stock plummeted. The press called it a fatal blow. At Horizon Jet's New York headquarters, the boardroom was silent. On the screen, the stock chart plunged straight down, the red line cutting like a knife. CEO Victor Hale stood at the table, his voice hoarse. "We've lost Meridian Nexus. There's no choice but to find a new provider." A trembling director spoke up. "But all the other firms have already been locked into contracts with our competitors. We have no way in." Silence. Hollow eyes, sunken faces. No one dared mention the name Blake Voss, who sat in the corner, head bowed, sweat forming on his brow. Everyone knew. He was the one who had sparked this nightmare from Seat 1A. Across the water, the top floor of Meridian Nexus glowed with light. Jordan Mercer stood before the glass wall, overlooking the bustling city below. Maya Patel entered, carrying a thick folder. "These are the signed contracts with the 3 airlines. We haven't just replaced Horizon Jet, we've surpassed them." Jordan gave a slight nod. His voice was calm but firm as steel. "It's not that we passed them. They dragged themselves down. We only showed them the cost of arrogance." In that moment, Jordan felt no triumph, no smile of satisfaction, only calm detachment, like a judge reading a verdict already written. A week later, at the International Aviation Summit in Singapore, Jordan stepped onto the stage. His charcoal suit fit perfectly, and his voice carried across a hall packed with CEOs, executives, and investors. In business, every contract has value. But there is one thing that, if lost, carries a price beyond measure: respect. People think a seat is just a place to sit, but sometimes a seat can decide the fate of an empire. The hall fell silent. Then thunderous applause erupted, echoing through the grand space. Meanwhile, Horizon Jet sank deeper into darkness. The press unearthed the full story, from the Seat 1A incident to the toxic culture of entitlement within the company. Images of Blake Voss, arms crossed and smirking in first class, flooded the internet, turning him into the symbol of decay and privilege. Major investor Conrad Voss, Blake's own father, was forced to publicly sever ties in a desperate attempt to salvage the family's reputation. Blake, once strutting arrogantly through first class, became the object of ridicule. Friends abandoned him, colleagues sneered, and even Horizon Jet's own board members looked at him with scorn and blame. At dusk, Jordan stood alone on his office balcony, the sea wind whipping, carrying the sharp tang of salt. The sunset painted San Diego Bay in burning red. He whispered, as if to himself, they thought a seat was just a seat. But sometimes that seat becomes the grave of an entire empire. Maya stood silently behind him, saying nothing. She knew Horizon Jet had only begun to taste the bitterness. The real storm was still ahead. Friday morning, a breaking news headline blazed across the national financial networks. Horizon Jet in freefall, stock down 40% in just 2 weeks. Passengers boycott en masse. The screens showed chaos at airports. Check, encounters overflowing. Passengers waving tickets and shouting in anger. Social media flooded with furious messages. A reporter stood before the camera, her voice taut as a wire. This is being called the worst crisis in the history of commercial aviation, and it all began with something seemingly small: Seat 1A on the Dallas-San Diego flight. Inside Horizon Jet's headquarters, CEO Victor Hale slumped over his desk, silver hair in disarray. The board of directors sat in silence, none able to offer a defense. In that suffocating quiet, an elderly shareholder's voice shook as he whispered, "We lost everything, because one passenger was humiliated in public." Slowly, every gaze in the room turned toward Blake Voss. He sat hunched, his face gaunt, eyes bloodshot. The arrogance he once wore so proudly had vanished without a trace. The vicious words of the press, the viral videos viewed millions of times, had made him the symbol of decline. No one spoke it aloud, but all knew the truth. Seat 1A was the grave that buried Horizon Jet's reputation, and Blake was the one who pushed them into the abyss. Meanwhile, at the International Aviation Summit, Jordan Mercer stepped onto the stage. The spotlight struck his charcoal suit, reflecting the unwavering determination in his eyes. The entire hall fell silent. Jordan began, his voice steady, resonant, sharp. "In business, we can assign a price to everything: an aircraft, a contract, a stock. But there is one thing that, once lost, renders every number meaningless. That is respect." He paused, letting the weight of silence hang heavy across the auditorium. People think a seat is just a place to sit, but sometimes a seat can determine the fate of an empire. Horizon Jet believed power lay in a VIP card. But the truth is, real power lies in how we treat people. Thunderous applause erupted, rolling across the room like a storm, unrelenting. Leaders, investors, journalists all understood the message. The aviation industry had just witnessed a quiet revolution. That night, Jordan returned to his office. San Diego's skyline glowed against the bay, lights shimmering on the water. He sat alone, a steaming cup of coffee before him. On the desk lay Horizon Jet's letter of apology, edges yellowed with time. He whispered softly, as if closing a chapter. "No one has the right to put a price on my dignity but me. And sometimes the silence of one person can echo louder than any engine." Outside the window, other planes streaked through the night sky, leaving trails of light behind. Seat 1A, in Jordan's memory, was no longer just a place on an airplane. It had become a symbol of justice, of human dignity, and of the lesson for anyone who dared to place privilege above respect. In the year-end reports, analysts wrote, "One decision in a first-class cabin rewrote the history of aviation." Meridian Nexus did not just shift market share, they redefined the standard. And when the public was asked what they thought of the story of Seat 1A, the overwhelming answer came in 2 words: human dignity. Jordan Mercer's story is not just a lesson for one airline. It is a wake-up call for the entire world, reminding us that true power does not lie in a VIP card or a first-class seat, but in how we choose to respect people, even when no one is watching. Seat 1A has become a symbol that reminds us that sometimes a single act of injustice is enough to shake an entire empire, and that it takes only one calm, steadfast person, willing to stand for dignity, to rewrite the rules of an entire industry. If you believe that dignity should never be bargained away, hit like to spread this message. Do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next stories, where arrogance is always exposed and justice always finds its voice. And finally, leave a comment with just 2 words: human dignity, to affirm that you too stand on the side of values that can never be lost.